Welcome to this tutorial about taking and receiving damage. So let's just jump into it and learn a little bit. So here we are inside of Unreal Engine 5, and this works just as well in Unreal Engine 4, although there might be slight visual differences. It should be possible to follow along, I hope. Anyway, so we will be talking about taking and receiving, actually dealing and receiving damage today. So there's a lot of ways to handle this. You can create your own system and have some kind of communication between different blueprints to send and receive information and then act upon that information. However, in Unreal Engine there is a damage system already implemented which you can make use of if you want to. And that is what we will be looking at today. To do that, however, we're going to make some props. So we're going to start off with creating a folder. We'll call it blueprints, because that's what I tend to do. And inside here, we're going to be creating a class. We're going to be calling or making an actor blueprint, and we're going to call it BP underscore dummy. Let's call it target dummy, actually, so it's very clear what this is for. So this is going to be our target dummy. So we'll open up this and we'll dock it up here, and we will add a component. We'll add a static mesh, like so. We'll call this, we can just keep the name static mesh for now. In addition to that, we want to go down to physics. And since we haven't chosen a static mesh yet, we can't simulate physics. So we're going to add a 1m cube for a 1 cubic meter cube. So now we can enter simulate physics, and we can put in a mass, and we can put something like, let's say 10 kilos or something. In addition to that, we're gonna be changing the appearance a little bit. So I'm going to be scaling this one down along a few axes. First a little bit on the width, and then a little bit along all axes. So we have something like a thin plate that we can make use of. And if we put this into the world now, this is what it looks like, and that looks fine. So let's put one of these meshes over here and scale that one up a little bit as well. So this will sort of act as our table for now. And we'll put one of these blueprints here, press the end key, and we can put it along the edge of the ground. However, since we have this centered in our blueprint, then it will not be aligning it with the bottom of the blueprint. So we'll first fix that. So if we go in here and we move it up a little bit, seems like this might be sort of aligned, but not quite. Something like that seems to be correct. So let's, yeah, now you can see also if we drop it down, it's going to be flush against the ground. So we'll just add a few of these here, as we have a few, like so. In addition to that, this one might be interacted with in this test as well, so we want to actually remove simulate physics on this actor, because this first person template that we're using, the white cubes here, they have simulate physics on them by default to shoot. This will be fine. And now we can go into our first person character and edit that a little bit. And the thing I want to do here is basically just disconnect the play sound at location here from our fire event, because this tends to be very loud. Like so. Okay, so there are a few blueprints now that we're going to be working with. First, it is the first person character, but we're actually not going to be doing that much with it. And then we're going to have our blueprint target dummy, and then the third blueprint we're going to be working with is on the first person BPs, on the blueprint, and the first person projectile. So we'll open this one up, and we'll actually disconnect the functionality that it currently has on it. So what we want to do is, if we go to we'll stay in the first person projectile here. If we right click now and we type in damage, you can see that we get some information here under the category game and damage. We have apply damage, apply point damage, apply radial damage, and apply radial damage with fall off. We're going to be looking at these today, so we're going to be dragging all of these out. So So we're gonna get the normal damage, we're gonna get the point damage, and we're gonna get the radial damage. We can actually bring out the last one as well, just so we have it as a reference how they are different. Damage, like so. So when you want to tell an actor that you want to send some damage information to it, this is what you have available to you per default. So the apply damage is sort of a catch-all, and this one happens whenever you take any kind of damage, or when you want to apply any kind of damage. The apply point damage is something you apply when you have a specific point in the world where you want to apply damage, and apply radial damage is something you apply with when you want to have something like a area of effect damage, like a grenade or an explosion, something along those lines. Equally, this one is also for explosions and area damage. However, you have a little bit more of customizability with this one, because you can see here we have a few more pins. You can see after damage radius here, or actually after origin, it changes. You have the base damage on both, you have the origin on both, but here there's a damage radius, and over here you have an inner radius, an outer radius, and a minimum damage. How these work are, you have a damage, so let's say we put in 100, then 100 is the damage that you're going to be taking, and if we put a damage radius of 100, meaning 1 meter, so that's would be a sphere of 2 meters in diameter, the damage from the center would be decreasing over time as you get further away from the center point, meaning that once you are just about outside this radius, you take 0 damage, and at range 100 I would assume you would take 1 damage, and then 50 centimeters from the center you would take 50 damage, and so on. I'm assuming this is linearly scaled. This one gives a little bit more customizability, because this one has base damage just like the other one. So if we were to put in 100 here, then you can have a minimum damage which will be applying a certain amount of damage minimum. So this is now the minimum amount of damage we can have, even if we're 1 meter away. If we say outer radius here 100, even if we were at the very edge of this outer radius, you would still take at least 20 damage, so you wouldn't take 1 damage like over here. Then you also have this inner radius, which defines within what kind of a sphere inside of this explosion should you be taking the maximum amount of damage. So if we were to put something like 50 here, then everything within 50 radius would take the full 100 damage, and then it will scale from there to the 100 here down until it eventually gets to 20. So that's how those work. But these are just one part of the equation. This is what we're sending information about who is getting damaged. And you can see that the apply damage here has a damaged actor, the apply point damage has a damaged actor. These ones do not, because these ones only take care of where in the world the explosion is, which is the origin point. And then from there it will find whichever actors in the world that it can damage and send a damage event to them. So let's take a look at this damage event then. So if we go to our target dummy, which is going to be our poor sod that's going to be taking damage today, and we go into its event graph, we can do something similar. We can type in damage, and instead of having the apply damage, we can go down to the go up to the events, any damage, event point damage, and event radial damage. So we'll just add all of these different events, like so. So now we have all of these 3 events, and now just for clarity, we're going to be printing some information here. So we'll be taking 3 print strings here and connecting them up. And the reason for this is, first we're gonna display how these actually work. So this one will say any damage whenever this one is fired. That's not how you spell damage. Like so. And this one is the point damage. and this one is the radial damage. Okay, so if we go back to our projectile here again now, instead when we say we hit something here, let's say that we apply some damage to an actor, and the actor that we're going to be applying it to is the other here, which is the other actor reference. And then we can leave it at 0 to begin with, and then we compile and play and see what happens. So here we have this character, I can shoot and we can see it bounces off. Nothing seems to happen, nothing is printed. The reason for that is, well, first off, I'm actually going to be doing this. I'm going to be taking this destroy actor, putting it over here. Then I'm going to play again so you can see what's happening. So you can actually see it is disappearing, it is detecting that something is being hit, but nothing is being printed. The reason for this is that we are applying damage, but since we're applying 0 damage as the result over there, then this event is never happening because 0 damage is not something we need to account for. So if we change this to be 1 damage, play again, you can see now that we're printing out any damage over there. If we go back to our first person projectile again and we decide to instead do point damage to the other actor, and like before we want to make sure that we actually have some kind of damage, so we'll put in 1. Now this one will complain because it needs a hit from direction. So let's do this. Let's go and take location from this hit actor, and then we can let's not do that actually. We have a projectile, we should be able to get velocity, I think. Yeah. Okay, so this is the velocity of this particular projectile. So that is its current direction, so we can use that as our hit direction. And it wants now to have a hit info. So what we can do is we can drag off this hit info and we can make a hit result. And now we can just, you can see all of this is going, there's a lot of stuff you can put in here, but we're gonna just be leaving it empty and then we can compile because it doesn't check against the values here. But we'll come back to this in a moment, just to show off how this works now. So now we have point damage that we're applying instead. Let's go back and shoot. So now you see we're shooting, but you can see that you're getting 2 messages printed. And that is because the any damage was the catch-all, like I mentioned earlier. So if you do point damage, that's going to generate a point damage event, but it will also be generating an any damage event, because this is called regardless of what kind of damage is being done. Equally, if you were to have radial damage, it will generate this event, but also generate this event. So that's something to be aware of. Now, let's go back to our projectile here. So we were sending in some information over here. The reason to have these different events happening is because on the receiving side, you can see that we have different amounts of information available to us. The event any damage doesn't really care that much about a lot of information. It checks who caused the damage, who's the owner of that damage, what is the damage type and how much damage was dealt to me, and then do something with that. But if you do something like point damage, you get more specific information. You get like a hit location. You get the normal of the hit location, meaning what kind of a direction would the surface have. Hit components, bone name, shot from direction. All of this is information that you can make use of in some meaningful way. So what we could do, for example, is use something like the hit location to add an impulse to it to have the object actually react to the hit. So let's do that. So if we right click and we type in add impulse, you see that we have something called add impulse at location. And if we plug this up like so, you can see we have an impulse, we have an impulse here, and we have a location. So the location is where we actually are hit, and we have that information available here. Then we have an impulse, which is going to be a direction of where the damage or the impulse is going, and that would make sense to have our shot from direction, which is the velocity from the bullet in this case. So we can use that like so. If we wanted this impulse to be something more, we could have it multiplied by something either on this side, and maybe change this pin to a float and have something like 100 or something and plug that in here. Or you could have on the sending side that the shot from direction is calculated over there, and you just hook this up from here. So if we do something like this, then we should be able to get a impulse. However, if we were to play this now, I don't think that this will work. Actually, it works fine. It flies away really, really far. Let's see if we can change some parameters. Let's try 10 maybe. Actually, we're sending in velocity. Let's try 1 and see what happens. Okay, so you see, depending on where you shoot it, you will have an effect, and depending on the velocity, it will have a more or less severe effect. I was not expecting this to work immediately though, because we have a hit from direction, which is good. Okay, the hit location is populated by itself. I figured we would have to do that ourselves, because you have a hit location over here on the hit event, and I figured we would have to send this over here to get this to work properly. Not entirely sure. This one might have just been working, or looked like it was working properly, even though it wasn't. It might have been calculating against 0, 0, 0, so the origin of the world, and then saying that that's where we hit from, and then calculate where it should be flying as a consequence from that. Because now, going back to the hit result here, this is a structure where we can use to send information. You can see in all of these events that we can send or over to whoever we're damaging, we can send some information like who we are and what's caused this. So like the event instigator here would be the controller that was responsible for this damage. So this would be the person that shot the projectile. The damage causer in this case then would be the projectile itself. And when we send this information over, it's available to the other player or whatever gets hit to use in some way. But again, applied damage is not very specific. Applied damage or applied point damage, however, is more specific. And one of the ways we can send a lot of information to it is through this hit info structure. So you can see you can add a bunch of different information here to be able to act upon it in a more specific way. In addition to this, we also have something called damage type class. Now we won't go a whole lot into the damage class types today, but we will be touching upon it a little bit because I want to do a radial damage test now. And we'll do a 100 damage, and we can see the origin point is going to be the hit location because it's going to be. And then to make this a little bit clearer, what we can also do is we can do a draw debug sphere. Like so. So we can actually see where we're supposed to be hitting. So our hit location over here is where we want to have as the center. And we have the damage radius here is 100, and this is hard coded, and we don't normally want that, but we'll keep it for now, and we can see that it's 100 over here as well. To make this clear, we can put a green color for it here. We can set the duration to be something like 10 seconds, and the thickness to be something like 2, just so we see it properly. So now shooting at something with this radial damage will create a sphere, so we'll see where we hit. We will be applying 100 damage. And yeah, we don't really need all of these other things for now because we're having such a simple example. So let's, we also need to go to the, no, okay, we changed the projectile. Okay, so now we're applying radial damage instead. So if we shoot now, you can see where the ball hits, it will create this radial damage cost. So that's what we're after. So again, let's go to this and shoot. And you can see, oh right, I didn't actually put a destroy after this. I won't have a destroy. So when we're actually hitting something, we want to destroy this projectile so it doesn't bounce around in infinity and cause a lot of radial damage. So like so. So we will shoot here and we hit, and you see nothing is really happening. But that's the actual sphere that we're getting our hit around. So, also, again, if we shoot here, you can see that in the top left, you can see any damage and radial damage, both are being printed like we spoke about earlier. So now, how can you apply some kind of damage with radial damage? Well, we are applying damage now. So the target dummy is getting damage here from the damage received, and it's being calculated depending on where we hit. But to make something like an impulse happen, you can do again like this. You can make a calculation and add an impulse if you want to. But you also have this ability through physics down here. If you check over here, add impulse on damage. And what this allows you to do is something like this. You can go here and you can create a new blueprint class, and you can type in the search field here damage type, which we spoke a little bit shortly about earlier. So we'll call this BP damage type radial, and we can open this up. And we have a little bit of information available to us here. Among the other things that we can do, if you have a destructible mesh, you can have some inputs in here for it to work, which we will not be touching today. But we do have this, which is a damage impulse on a rigid body when it comes to radial damage. So this is the damage or the impulse that we will get if we use this. So now that we have created this, we can go back to our first person projectile, and we can change the damage type of the radial damage to be of BP type radial damage. And now when we shoot something and hit it like this, you can see that it moves slightly, and this is in relation to the setting in our damage type. So if we go into our damage type again and we set something, instead of 800 we set something like 2500 maybe, then this is what will be determining how much of an effect it has on its physics and what kind of an impulse it gets. So if we add this to, or up this to 8000, it should be 10 times what we had in the beginning. And it's pretty clear now that it's being stronger. And you can also notice that it's taking the origin and calculating how that is supposed to affect the object itself through the impulse that it's also getting. So yeah. We will be going through damage types more in a future episode, of course, but I hope that this gives an understandable view of how does damage work. You can apply damage from whatever is supposed to apply damage. In this case we used a projectile. You can use something else like a specific character that's shooting or something like that if you want to. But this is just the sending part. Then you also need to have on the receiving part the damage event which actually causes the damage and then act upon it in some way. So you would have the damage and reduce hit points from it and have impulses and maybe terrain or something like that being destroyed or affected by damage as well. So that's how damage basically works in Unreal Engine if you do not want to implement your own damage system. But this is fairly usable for most cases. You have a lot of information sent. In case you find it lacking, you can of course create your own and put whatever information you want to send instead. And then you can use this as sort of a blueprint for how it can be done. I hope that made sense. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you liked the video, leave a like. If you did not like it, leave a dislike. Leave any suggestions or comments you have down below. Subscribe and share this video if you want to see more like it in the future. That is all for now. Keep on learning. Take care.